They left her lying sick in the street, expecting her to die, but a heartbroken prince took her into his home. Before we begin this beautiful period romance, please tell me in the comments where you are listening from. I would love to know where you are joining me from. The street was almost empty, as if Seville knew how to turn a blind eye too. The cobblestones held the night's cold and returned it mercilessly. Aurelia Benavente pressed her cheek against a damp stone. Only parts of her body were responsive, her numb hands, her burning chest, and her dry throat. She wanted to call out to someone, Ishalman, but her voice refused to obey her. She heard footsteps, then more, and the sound of a carriage in the distance. She heard the rustle of fine fabrics as someone passed by. They didn't look at her. A woman pulled her shawl tighter around her neck and quickened her pace. A man muttered a prayer without stopping. A child tugged at his mother's hand, and she pulled him away as if Aurelia were a bad omen. Aurelia closed her eyes, not out of resignation, but because opening them hurt. The fever made her see shadows stretching out like fingers. Air entered her chest with difficulty, and a stubborn idea spun in her head. I mustn't bother anyone. I mustn't bother anyone. This idea had been in her mind since she started coughing, since before. Since the first time they told her there was no cure and that she was a nuisance and no longer of any use. She heard footsteps again. These were different. They weren't running. They weren't moving away. They stopped. Aurelia wanted to move her head, but her neck wouldn't respond. She could only open her eyes slightly. She saw clean black boots and the edge of a dark coat. Then she heard a deep, restrained male voice. Is she alive? The question didn't sound curious. It sounded like someone forcing themselves to ask, even though they wanted to walk on Batbo. Another voice, lower and nervous, spoke up. Your Highness, it's not a good idea. The street is not the place. I asked you if she's alive. Aurelia felt her own breath trembling. She wanted to say yes, that she still was, barely, but her tongue felt like a rag. Someone bent down. A firm, steady hand brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. It wasn't a caress, it was a quick gesture, as if checking an invisible wound. Breathe, said the man. Your Highness might be ill. And yet people, the city, the whole world can keep walking. I can't. That phrase stuck with Aurelia in a strange way. Not because of what was said, but how it was said, as if he were tired of obeying. Aurelia tried to focus on his face, but her vision danced. She could only make out his tense jaw and dark eyes that showed no tenderness. They showed something else. Loss. Bring me a blanket, he ordered, his voice low. And water, Your Highness. There was now a rush of footsteps, coming and going. Aurelia felt the cold recede slightly when they placed a blanket over her. She wanted to cling to that feeling as if it were a lifeline. What is your name? The man asked. Aurelia opened her mouth. A small sound came out of her throat. Say it slowly, he said. Aurelia, she managed to say. The word came out broken. Family. Aurelia swallowed and the world lit up. She didn't want to cry, but her body had other ideas. Tears mixed with the street dust. She didn't whisper. They didn't let me. The man stood still for a moment. Aurelia felt his gaze like an inevitable, if not heavy, weight. Who? Aurelia wanted to answer with names, but they melted away in her fever. She remembered hands pushing her and voices saying, There's no room. We can't take this on. Enough was enough. She remembered a door closing, then the street. Faith, yes. They took her out, she said. They said yes. What did they say? Aurelia clutched the blanket with her weak, useless fingers. The man exhaled through his nose, as if the phrase disgusted him. Not her, he said. What they did to her. Can you stand up? He asked. Aurelia tried to move one leg. She felt no strength. She shook her head slightly. Then we'll take you, he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The other voice, that of his companion, hurried him. Your Highness, to your residence. This will cause a stir. A stranger found like this? People will carry her. But I won't, said the man. Fine, said the man. Then we'll carry her. Aurelia felt them lift her carefully but decisively. The world spun, and for a moment she thought it was going to split in two. She clung to the coat of the person holding her as best she could. It smelled of fine soap and cold air. She couldn't say she was scared, or of what. "Don't take me back. Take me back where?" he asked. "The street," said Aurelia, her fear making her voice clearer. "Don't leave me again." The man clenched his jaw and lowered his voice. "You're not going back to the street?" Aurelia wanted to believe him, but her mistrustful nature pulled her back. Nevertheless, at that moment, her body chose to surrender. The warmth of the blanket and the firmness of his embrace made her think only of one thing. Maybe I won't die today. The journey was just noise, wheels, voices, an opening door, the scent of clean wood, and a floor that wasn't stone. Aurelia heard quick, precise orders. Clear the hallway. Don't let anyone see her. A room at the back, the quietest one. Hot water. Now someone protested. "Your Highness, the lady. If anyone wants to argue, they can argue with me." Aurelia felt herself being laid down on a bed that seemed too white for her. She wanted to move away, to avoid making it dirty or causing discomfort. But she didn't have the strength to do that. She could hear voices around her, as if she were at the center of a contained storm. Where did that girl come from? From the street, they say. Be quiet. They'll hear you. But if she's ill, she'll infect us. What if she causes problems? What problems can a poor girl cause? Aurelia wanted to say, "I'm not a problem, I'm nobody," but she didn't dare. Female hands touched her forehead. They were strong hands with commanding fingers. "She's burning up," said an older woman's voice. "Who let her in?" "I did," replied a man's voice. The word "I" sounded like a seal. The woman did not fall. "Your Highness, with all due respect, this house has rules. You cannot bring her in." "I didn't ask for your permission, Doña Elvira," he said with icy calm. "I asked for a room and hot water." Aurelia opened her eyes as soon as she saw the serious man's profile and the woman with the cap, hard face and unyielding gaze. Doña Elvira looked her up and down as if assessing a problem. "What is your name?" Doña Elvira asked, without gentleness. "Aurelia," said Aurelia. "Last name?" Aurelia blinked, her surname stuck in her throat like a bone. "Benavente," she said at last. Doña Elvira showed no surprise, but her eyes sharpened. "Benavente from where?" Aurelia swallowed. "I don't know," she lied. Or maybe it wasn't a lie. They had never told her exactly where. Doña Elvira let out an aha that did not bode well. A door opened and a man entered, carrying a briefcase and looking sleepy but professional. He greeted them with a bow. "Look at her," said the prince to your highness. "I want her to live." The doctor approached Aurelia, took her pulse, lifted her eyelid, and touched her neck with cold fingers. Aurelia felt like an object being examined, but the prince stood there like a wall. "She is very weak," said the doctor. "She has a high fever and an irregular pulse. It could be an infection." "Is she going to die, Yoy?" asked the prince. The doctor hesitated, and that hesitation cast a shadow over the bed. "If she doesn't rest, yes," he replied honestly. "Even resting, she's at her limit." Aurelia felt a twinge, not from pain but from shame at being at her limit, a hindrance and a burden. That was it. Doña Elvira crossed her arms, and His Highness listened. "If he dies here, he won't die," said the prince. "And if he dies, what then? Will Seville know? Will Madrid know? Will the court know?" Doña Elvira insisted, choosing her words like polished knives. The prince finally looked at her. His eyes did not scream, but they commanded respect. "Seville already knows many things, and yet it continues to breathe. If Madrid asks, I will answer," he said. "And if the court is scandalized, let it be scandalized." The doctor cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I need herbs, cloths, water, rest, and for no one to disturb her. Fever does not forgive mistakes." "She will have them," said the prince. Doña Elvira sighed, resigned to the fact that she would not win that battle today. "I will take care of it," she said, "but if this young woman brings misfortune, do not say I did not warn you." Aurelia wanted to say that she did not wish misfortune on anyone. She wanted to ask forgiveness for existing. Only a sigh came out. The doctor instructed them to make her comfortable. Doña Elvira directed a maid, "Clean her face, change her clothes carefully." The young maid approached with trembling hands. She carefully removed the hair stuck to her forehead. Aurelia felt the warm water on her skin and almost cried with relief. Calm down, whispered the maid, as if she were afraid to be there too. Don't move. Aurelia closed her eyes and heard footsteps receding, followed by the prince's voice approaching. Come down. It's not for everyone. Who are you, Aurelia Benavente? Aurelia opened her eyes slightly. He was standing at the edge of the bed, not touching her, as if unsure whether he could allow himself that gesture. No, no one, she replied. I don't believe you, he replied, neither harshly nor conceding anything. Aurelia trembled, not from the cold, but from his gaze which seemed to pierce through her lies, born of sheer exhaustion. I was working, she said, searching for something certain. In whose house? Aurelia pressed her lips together. If she mentioned names, streets, or anything else, whatever had thrown her out onto the street would return. And that thing, even if it didn't have a clear face, had hands. I don't remember, she said. The fever gave her an excuse. The prince watched her for a moment, then stood up. Rest, he said. No one is going to take you away. Aurelia clung to those words like a prayer, but doubt gnawed at her. Wait, she asked. Her voice was fragile and almost childlike. Why did you help me? The prince took a long time to answer, as if searching for an answer that wouldn't put her in danger. Because I saw you, he said at last. Aurelia blinked. That's not enough, she murmured. It's enough for me, he replied, and there was something in his tone that sounded like self-reproach. Doña Elvira came in again with a clean cloth. Your Highness, if you'll allow me, she said. Gentlemen, don't stay in Doña Elvira's room, he cut her off. It was a gentle warning. If you allow me, I decide where I stay. Doña Elvira squeezed the cloth but remained silent. The prince looked at Aurelia one last time before leaving. If you need anything, he said. Aurelia hesitated, her throat tightened. Don't send me back, she repeated as if her life depended on it. The prince gave a slight, almost imperceptible bow. He didn't leave. The door closed and Aurelia was left with Doña Elvira and the maid. Doña Elvira approached her. There was no tenderness in her face, but she was attentive rather than contemptuous. She adjusted the cloth on her forehead. I'm going to tell you something, she whispered, so that the maid couldn't hear everything. You are in an important house. Here, one wrong look can destroy someone. So if you come here to play games with lies, Aurelia opened her eyes with effort. I don't play games, she whispered. Doña Elvira looked at her for a moment, then stood up straight. I hope so. The maid began to unbutton Aurelia's blouse, doing so modestly and without looking too closely. Aurelia wanted to help, but her body wouldn't respond. The maid found something hard under the fabric at chest level. What is this? Said the young woman in surprise. Aurelia felt a rush of panic. I didn't say anything. For the first time, she spoke loudly. Don't touch it. The maid stood still. Doña Elvira approached quickly. What have you got there? Aurelia swallowed. It was all she had left. It was the one thing they couldn't take from her because they couldn't find it. She had hidden it herself, using nothing but her fingernails and stubbornness. It's not from here, said Aurelia, as if that explained everything. It's mine. Doña Elvira did not reach out immediately. She looked at Aurelia with suspicion, as if she had seen too many people pretend, but also with caution, knowing that the truth can sometimes be dangerous. Let's see, she said. Aurelia hesitated. Her fingers trembled. If she showed it, she would lose it. If she didn't, Doña Elvira would take it from her anyway, and she no longer had the strength to fight. With an awkward gesture, Aurelia took out the object, a small, dark metal medallion with worn edges. It wasn't shiny, nor did it look like a showy jewel. It was more like an old family heirloom, a promise. The chain was blackened from use. The maid's eyes widened. That looks expensive, doesn't it? Said Aurelia, clutching it tightly. It's not for sale. Doña Elvira took it with firm but gentle fingers. She held it up to the light. She turned it over. On the bas-relief was barely visible, eroded by the years but discernible to the trained eye. Aurelia watched Doña Elvira's face. She saw the hardness disappear for a moment, as if an internal barrier had broken. Where did you get it? Asked Doña Elvira. Now her voice was not only stern, it was anxious too. Aurelia felt the fever return like a wave. They gave it to me, she replied, so that I wouldn't forget. Who? Aurelia closed her eyes. She saw a blurred image of a woman with warm hands and a firm voice. She remembered a phrase: if something happens to you one day, don't let it go. It belongs to you. It protects you. Someone who took care of me, she murmured. Doña Elvira clutched the locket. The maid looked as if she were witnessing something forbidden. Doña Elvira, said the maid, lowering her voice. What's wrong? Doña Elvira didn't answer. She stared at the seal as if it were staring back at her. Aurelia tried to sit up. Give it back to me, she said, her dignity coming from somewhere deep within. Please, she said, taking a deep breath. She started to speak, but didn't finish the sentence. She looked towards the door as if afraid someone might hear. Aurelia felt a wave of clear, icy fear wash over her. What's going on? She asked softly. Doña Elvira lowered the medallion and covered it with the cloth, as if hiding it could undo what she had already seen with her own eyes. Come in, she said slowly. If this is what it looks like, then your arrival was no accident. Aurelia felt the world slipping away from her again. I don't understand. Doña Elvira leaned over her, and for the first time, her voice sounded almost human rather than rigid. Listen to me carefully, girl. No one here provides shelter for free, and that seal belongs to people who don't want surprises. The maid took a step back in fright. So they're going to kick you out? Asked the young woman. Aurelia clutched the sheets with her weak hands. Terror gripped her chest. No, Aurelia said, trembling. No, I don't want any trouble. Doña Elvira stared at her. You already have it, she said, not unkindly, as if stating an inevitable truth. Aurelia tried to speak, but her cough got the better of her. It was a dry cough that scraped her throat. The maid hurried to get her some water. Doña Elvira held her head firmly. Slowly, she ordered. Aurelia took a sip. It burned, but it revived her. She lay there, breathing and staring at the ceiling as if she could find answers there. What? What are you going to do? Asked Doña Elvira. She held the medallion in her hand and closed her fingers over it. I'm going to do what I should have done when I first saw you, she said. I'm going to make sure you don't die, because if you do, no one will ask why. But if you live, they'll ask all sorts of questions. Aurelia felt the weight of those words more than her fever. Suddenly, living was dangerous. I just wanted to rest, whispered Doña Elvira. She adjusted the cloth on her forehead again. Rest, she said, neither gently nor mockingly, and don't say more than is necessary. The nervous maid looked at the door. We'll let the prince know. Doña Elvira remained still, then her jaw tense. She said, not yet. First, I have to be sure. Aurelia wanted to ask sure of what, but her eyes closed of their own accord, as if her body had made the decision for her. Before losing herself to the fever, she heard footsteps outside and muffled voices. The constant murmur of a large house that never sleeps completely. And as if coming from the street, she heard a phrase that had been said to her when they left her. No one is going to get involved for you. Aurelia clenched her fingers as if she could hold the world with that gesture. The medallion was no longer inside her hand. Only emptiness remained. She wanted to cry, but no tears came. Instead, she thought with strange clarity, if they take it away from me, I'll be left without a name. If they take it away, I'll have no proof without protection. The fever pulled her down. Doña Elvira stood silently by her side, studying Aurelia's face, as if searching for answers to old questions. The maid whispered, Doña Elvira, what did you see? Doña Elvira was slow to answer. When she did, her voice was tense. I saw a seal, she said, that should not be hanging around the neck of a girl found on the street. The maid crossed herself. God help us. Doña Elvira did not. Instead, she clutched the medallion tightly, as if the metal might escape. And may God also protect the prince, she murmured, for he does not know what he has just brought into his home. As she cleaned the object, Doña Elvira distinguished an engraved noble seal, and the color drained from her face because she recognized that mark and knew it would cause trouble. The fever did not leave her at once. It lingered like a stubborn visitor, coming and going, leaving her mouth dry and her thoughts jumbled. Aurelia awoke to light filtering through a heavy curtain. For a moment, she thought she was still in the street. She searched for the stone under her cheek, but found only a pillow and the smell of soap. She sat up slightly, and the world spun around her. Don't get up, said a nearby voice. It was the doctor sitting with a small notebook in his hand. He had dark circles under his eyes and the tired expression of someone who had decided not to lie. Where? Aurelia tried to answer, but only a whisper came out. In the prince's residence, he replied as if it were the most normal thing in the world, and as if the sentence itself carried a storm. Aurelia swallowed, her throat burned. I shouldn't be here. The doctor looked at her over the notebook. Tell that to His Highness, he said. I'm paid to prevent you from dying on my watch. Aurelia wanted to get out of bed, but her legs wouldn't obey her. She clung to the sheet, ashamed of her weakness. Am I going to die? She asked before her fear took hold again. The doctor exhaled. If you rest, he didn't say, then no. But if you insist on getting up and being scared of everything, then yes. I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying it because your body has reached its limit. Aurelia closed her eyes. Limit. That word came back to her like a soft blow. So can I live? She murmured. You can, he replied, but you need rest, water, broth, and silence. Aurelia opened her eyes. There won't be any silence, she said, her clarity of speech surprising even herself. I was a problem. I still am. The doctor didn't laugh. The problems of people with money can't be solved with herbs, he replied. But yours, with luck, can. Without warning, the door opened and Doña Elvira entered. She was carrying a clean cloth in one arm and a simple tray in the other. Her face was still hard, but her eyes were alert, as if she had been up all night. How is she? She asked the doctor, not looking at Aurelia. She's alive, he replied, and she'll live if you don't upset her. Doña Elvira set the tray on a nearby table. No one in this house gets upset without permission, she said. Then she finally looked at Aurelia. Are you in any pain? Aurelia was surprised by the question. It didn't sound affectionate, but it was practical, as if she was acknowledging Aurelia's existence for the time being. It hurts to breathe, she replied honestly. The doctor raised an eyebrow. That's enough, he muttered, putting away his notebook. I'll be back at noon. Don't leave her alone with arguments or curious visitors. Doña Elvira gave him a look that could cut bread. Curious visitors? Curiosity doesn't come in through the door, it sneaks in through the cracks. The doctor bowed slightly and left. Doña Elvira took the cloth and placed it on Aurelia's forehead. You're going to eat, she said. Aurelia looked at the tray. Broth, a piece of bread and water. I can't pay for this, she whispered. Doña Elvira frowned. Don't even try. If you're coming here to play the martyr, you'll tire quickly. Aurelia looked down, ashamed. I don't want to be in debt. In this house, everyone owes something, replied Doña Elvira. You owe it to yourself to live, for example. They already put you here, and now no one wants to be stuck with a dead body when they don't know who it is. The words were harsh, but not cruel. Aurelia felt the blow to her chest. I do know who I am, she said. As soon as she said it, however, she regretted it because it wasn't entirely true. Doña Elvira stared at her. Oh yes, then tell me, without trembling, who left you on the street? Aurelia felt her throat close up. Images of the door, the voices, and you're no good anymore came back to her like a dizzy spell. It's not true, I know, she said, and it was half true. I can't say. Doña Elvira clenched her jaw. As you wish, she murmured. But silence comes at a high price here. Aurelia took a sip of broth. It tasted like a simple life. The prince asked, afraid to hear the answer. Doña Elvira did not answer right away. She seemed to be choosing her words carefully. He's busy, she said at last. And he's irritated by me, by everything, replied Doña Elvira. By the world, by the court, by himself. You just got in his way. Aurelia put down her spoon. Then I shouldn't have. It's over now. Doña Elvira cut her off. Now eat. Aurelia obeyed, not because of her mission, but because her body demanded it. As she ate, she could hear voices through the door. They were distant, but still audible. A large house was never completely silent. Did you hear? They found her in the street. They say His Highness carried her. He carried her. Don't make things up. I swear to God, that's not done. That's why people are talking. Aurelia squeezed the edge of her plate with her fingers. Her face burned with shame. Even though no one could see her, she felt exposed. Doña Elvira heard the same thing and threw open the door. "Who's there?" she snapped. The murmurs died down instantly. Footsteps ran away. Doña Elvira slammed the door shut and returned. "That's just the beginning," she said. Aurelia swallowed hard. "I'm leaving," she said, her courage born more of fear than determination. "As soon as I can, I'll walk away." Doña Elvira looked at her as if she were stubborn. "Where to?" "Somewhere I won't be in the way." Back on the street, Doña Elvira let out a short, humorless laugh. "Don't be foolish. If you leave today, you'll die. And if you die, there'll be just as much scandal here. But worse, while mine." Aurelia remained silent. Doña Elvira watched her for a moment, then moved closer. She lowered her voice. "Last night I saw something," she said. Aurelia felt her stomach tighten. "The medallion," she murmured. Doña Elvira reached into her apron and took out the object, which was wrapped in the same cloth. She placed it on the table, but did not give it to Aurelia. Instead, she kept it close to her own hand. "This is not just anything," she said. "Do you understand?" Aurelia nodded, her lips pressed together. "It's the only thing I have," she said. "I didn't steal it. You're going to repeat that to me as many times as necessary," replied Doña Elvira, "because there will be people who would rather believe the opposite." Aurelia swallowed. "Who?" she asked. Doña Elvira straightened up. "People who live by appearances," she said. "People who smile and destroy with a single sentence. People who believe that a seal is worth more than a life." Aurelia looked at the medallion as if it were part of her that had been taken out of her body. "Are they going to take it away from me?" she asked. Doña Elvira, she looked at her sternly but not indifferently. "I'll keep it for you," she said. "For now, if you wear it, they'll notice. If they notice, they'll ask you questions. And if they ask you questions, you'll get scared. And if you get scared, you'll fall again." Aurelia wanted to argue, but the logic was cruel and clear. "All right," she whispered. "Just don't lose it." Doña Elvira put it away again. "I don't lose important things," she replied. Then, as if it were difficult for her, she added, "especially not things that can set a house on fire." The door opened again, this time with an even louder bang. A man in a sober suit entered, one of those who moves as if the house were an accounting ledger. He had a concerned look that he made no attempt to hide. "Doña Elvira," he said, addressing her without greeting Aurelia, "His Highness needs you downstairs." Doña Elvira tensed. "I'm busy." "The administrator is not waiting," he insisted. Aurelia looked at Doña Elvira. "Go ahead," she said timidly. "I can do it." "You can't do anything," the man finally said, looking at her as if measuring her with contempt. "Stay where you are." Aurelia felt the heat rise to her face, not because she was offended, but because of the reminder. "You're nobody here." Doña Elvira turned to him, her eyes ablaze. "Watch your language, Ramiro," she said. "She's sick." "Precisely," he replied, "and that's why this is a mistake." Doña Elvira pressed her lips together and left. The man lingered for a moment longer as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he just shook his head in disdain and left. Aurelia was left alone with the echo of mistake. She tried to settle herself, breathing slowly. She tried not to cry, but a tear escaped, silently and angrily. The door opened again. This time it was the chaplain, an elderly man with a kind face and careful eyes. "Good morning, my child," he said, not quite entering the room. "May I come in?" Aurelia wiped a tear away with the back of her hand. "Yes," she whispered. The chaplain entered with soft steps. He was holding a rosary, but he did not wave it threateningly. He sat down on a nearby chair, keeping his distance. "I'm not here to interrogate you," he said. "I'm here to see if you need anything." Aurelia looked at him suspiciously. She had learned that kindness could sometimes be a trap. "I just want to get better so I can leave," she said at last. The chaplain sighed. "You want to leave because you're ashamed," he said calmly. Aurelia lowered her gaze. "Because I'm causing problems." "The problems were already there," he replied. "They just came to light." Aurelia clutched the sheet. "Why are they talking to me like this?" she asked, almost angrily. "They don't know me." The chaplain looked at her patiently. "Because they're watching you," he said, "and because he saw you." Aurelia felt her heart skip an uncomfortable beat. He The chaplain didn't smile, but his eyes said it all. He's hurt, he murmured. When someone who is hurt sees another broken person, they can become scared, angry, or stop. Aurelia swallowed hard. I don't want him to destroy himself because of me. The chaplain bowed his head. Then don't destroy yourself, he said simply. Aurelia remained silent. In the silence that followed, she could hear the house murmuring like a large, restless animal. Downstairs in the living room, Gaspar stood by a window. He wasn't looking outside, just staring into space. The administrator, Ramiro, stood in front of him with papers in his hand. Doña Elvira stood to one side with her arms crossed. Your Highness, this is unsustainable, said Ramiro. The servants are talking and the neighbors are asking questions. This morning, a man from the town hall arrived with that fake smile of people who don't want to get their hands dirty. Gaspar barely turned his head. What does the town hall want? To take care of the city's hygiene, Ramiro replied with measured sarcasm. Or so they say. In reality, they wanted to know if you are harboring an unknown sick person. They fear contagion. They fear scandal. Gaspar clenched his jaw. Let them fear in silence. Ramiro took a careful step. There's also the issue of her name, he added. You withdrew from court to be at peace. Your Highness, you succeeded. Don't ruin it for her. Doña Elvira raised her hand as if to block him. Watch what you say, she warned. Ramiro ignored her and continued talking about a girl no one knows. He finished. Gaspar looked at him coldly. I know her well enough, he said. I know she was thrown away like trash. Do you find that acceptable? Ramiro swallowed hard. It's not about what's acceptable, Your Highness. It's about what people will say. Gaspar let out a brief, bitter laugh. It's always about what people say, he said. Never about what you do. Doña Elvira cleared her throat. Your Highness, I also fear what people will say, but the girl is in a very bad way. If they throw her out, I won't, Gaspar cut in. Ramiro threw his arms open in despair. Then at least keep her hidden, he said. Let no one see her. Let no one know. That way we can save her reputation. Gaspar looked at him as if he had said something indecent. I'm saving her by hiding someone, he said. That's saving. Ramiro clutched the papers. Your title, Your Highness, your name. The Arriaga y Montellano family cannot. Gaspar took a step closer. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. My name is not tarnished by giving shelter, he said. It is tarnished by closing my eyes. Ramiro looked down, but he didn't give up. What if the young woman is a thief? He blurted out. What if she's carrying stolen goods? What if she's on the run? What about her story? Doña Elvira shifted tensely. Gaspar glanced at her sideways as if he had noticed something. Do you know something? He asked Doña Elvira. Doña Elvira pressed her lips together. I know she's ill, she replied evasively. Gaspar didn't press her, but the silence spoke volumes. Ramiro took advantage of it. You see, he said, we don't even know who she is, and yet she's already in your house. What would the court say if they knew? What would your peers say? Gaspar turned back to the window. They'd say, I'm crazy, he replied emotionlessly. They would say, you are weak, Ramiro corrected him. Gaspar stood still, as if that word had touched an old wound. I was weak once, he murmured, and it cost me dearly. Doña Elvira looked at him as if she felt hidden compassion for him. Ramiro persisted more gently, as if changing his approach. Your Highness, you have lost and suffered enough. You don't need to bear another burden. Gaspar turned his head quickly. Don't use that to convince me, he said. The ice in his voice made Ramiro swallow his reply. Doña Elvira intervened firmly. What Ramiro is trying to say, she continued, is that the house is unsettled. The servants are not stone, and if the young lady stays, order must be restored. Gaspar nodded slightly. We will restore order, he said, and if anyone has a loose tongue, we will shut it with force. Ramiro let out a frustrated sigh. Then at least, Your Highness, he continued, let me find a discreet place, a hospice or a convent, where she will be cared for. Gaspar looked at him with dangerous calm. You want to take a sick woman out of bed so that the rumors don't bother you? Ramiro remained silent. Gaspar walked toward the door. She stays, said His Highness. Ramiro tried once more. Gaspar stopped. He spoke without turning around. If the price of my peace of mind is turning a blind eye, then I prefer the noise, he said. He went upstairs without waiting for a response. When he reached the hallway, two maids quickly moved aside as if he were a shadow that should not be looked at directly. Gaspar opened the door to the room without knocking. He entered and found the chaplain sitting nearby and Aurelia lying down, pale but awake. The chaplain stood up. Your Highness, he said respectfully. Gaspar nodded. Leave us, he said, not ordering it too much. The chaplain looked at Aurelia as if to ask her permission, and she nodded slowly. The chaplain left. Gaspar approached the bed. He wasn't smiling. He looked more tired than the night before. How are you feeling? He asked. Aurelia swallowed. Alive, she replied. I don't know why. Gaspar stared at her for a moment. Why did you rest? He replied, sounding practical. Aurelia let out a short laugh that ended in a cough. Gaspar waited, not touching her, until she had calmed down. Have you regretted it yet? Aurelia asked bluntly. Gaspar raised an eyebrow. About what? About bringing me here, she said. I've heard it's a mistake. Gaspar didn't feign surprise. Who told you that? Aurelia hesitated. She didn't want to accuse the administrator. She didn't want to make another enemy. No one, Shoma, she lied. Gaspar watched her with tense patience. In this house, words travel, he said, and they reach you faster because you have nothing to defend yourself with. Aurelia clutched the sheet. I can defend myself, she said, though it sounded more like a wish than a fact. Gaspar looked at her. How? He asked. Not mockingly, but with genuine interest. Aurelia remained silent. How could a sick woman with no useful skills defend herself? She wanted to say by working because it was the only thing she knew. I can help, she said at last. When I get up, I can clean. I can. Gaspar frowned, as if the idea offended him for reasons that Aurelia didn't understand. I didn't bring you here to be paid in back labor, he said. Aurelia felt ashamed again. Then why? She asked, lowering her voice. Gaspar was slow to respond. His gaze drifted to a spot on the walls if he could see a memory there. I don't know, he said at last. That's what irritates me. Aurelia dared to look at him more closely. His eyes held something locked inside that he didn't want to let out. And yet there she was, in that room, seeing him about his pain as if it were her business. I don't want to stay long, Aurelia said. Gaspar looked back at her. You'll stay until you can walk without falling, he said. And then I'll leave, Aurelia insisted, a hint of stubbornness in her voice. Gaspar leaned forward slightly, as if it were difficult for him to get close to someone. You'll decide later, he said. You want to make a decision today with a fever. Aurelia clenched her jaw. If I decide later, she murmured, I'll owe you even more. Gaspar looked at her firmly. You're clinging to the debt as if it were your only way to control something. You don't control anything when you're sick, and I'm not going to let you out on the street, dream yes, so you can feel brave. Aurelia looked at him, surprised by his tone. There was more than authority in his voice. There was anger, and beneath that, defensiveness. Why do you care? She blurted out. As soon as the words left her mouth, she regretted them. They sounded like a reproach. Gaspar wasn't offended, though. He just clenched his jaw again. Because I've seen what happens when someone convinces themselves they're worthless, he said. He paused, as if he didn't want to say what came next. And because I don't want to see someone lying there again, as if they were nothing. Aurelia felt her chest tighten. I'm worthless, she said softly, almost as if it were a confession. Gaspar looked at her, but his harshness was not directed at her. Don't say that, he said. It was an order. Aurelia swallowed. She didn't answer. The silence was filled with the sound of their breathing. Gaspar stood up straight. Doña Elvira will bring you food, he said. The doctor will come back too. Don't get up. Aurelia nodded. Gaspar walked to the door. He paused. If anyone speaks to you contemptuously, he said without turning around, will you tell me? Aurelia pressed her lips together. She didn't want to seem whiny. I'm used to it, she said. Gaspar. He turned his head and barely looked at her, as if the mere mention of his name were a new wound. Well, here you'll get out of the habit, he said before leaving. Aurelia was left with a strange feeling in her heart, as if she had been both scolded and protected. She lay down, trying to obey. A little while later, a maid came in with a basket of clean clothes. It wasn't the same maid as the night before. This one had a harder face and curious eyes. I'm going to change your sheets, she said, not greeting Aurelia. Aurelia nodded and moved aside as best she could. The maid worked quickly, and as she did so, she saw the old bruises on Aurelia's arm. The kind that don't look recent, the kind that come from falls, from carrying heavy loads, from living with little. Did they hit you? Asked the maid, her curiosity lacking compassion. Aurelia tensed. No, she said. The maid let out a little laugh. Of course, she murmured. And you chose that ugly dress yourself. They say here that they picked you up like a dog. Aurelia felt her face flush. I'm not a boss, she said more firmly than she had expected. The maid shrugged. It doesn't matter to the street, she said, and it doesn't matter to us either. Let's see how long the prince's favor lasts. Aurelia clutched the sheet tightly. She wanted to answer, but she couldn't make a sound. The humiliation weighed heavier on her than the fever. The door flew open and Doña Elvira appeared. What did you say? She asked curtly. The maid jumped. Nothing, Doña Elvira. I heard you, said Doña Elvira, approaching the maid as if she were a badly placed candle. We don't talk like that here. If you don't know how to serve with respect, I'll send you to the corridors to carve stone with your fingernails. Do you understand? The maid swallowed hard. Yes, Doña Elvira. Get out, she ordered. The maid almost ran out. Aurelia looked down, trembling. She hated herself for feeling weak, but those words had touched something deep inside her. Doña Elvira approached her without gentleness. Don't cry, she said. Aurelia pressed her lips together. A tear slipped out anyway. I don't want to cause trouble, she murmured. Doña Elvira sighed as if she were already fed up with hearing that phrase. I'll tell you straight, she said. You've already caused trouble, not because you exist, but because that's how people are. So if you're going to stay, even just for a few days, you'd better shape up. Aurelia looked up, confused. How? She asked. Doña Elvira looked her up and down. Like a person, she said, not like someone asking permission to breathe. Aurelia swallowed. I don't know how to be anything else, Doña Elvira confessed. She fell silent for a moment. Then she spoke more slowly, as if something had softened without her meaning it to. Then learn, she said. Aurelia looked down. She wanted to thank her, but couldn't find the right words. Doña Elvira abruptly changed the subject. You're going to eat, you're going to sleep, and when you wake up, you're going to tell me one thing, she said. Aurelia felt her stomach tighten. What thing? Doña Elvira leaned forward slightly. I want to know if you can read, she said. Aurelia blinked. She hadn't expected that question. Yes, she replied hesitantly. A little. Doña Elvira looked at her suspiciously. A little, she repeated. Aurelia bit her lip. She remembered the voice of the woman who had looked after her and taught her the alphabet, words and stories. She remembered the old books that were kept like treasures. Yes, I know, she admitted. I can read. Doña Elvira narrowed her eyes. And write? Aurelia hesitated, then nodded. Doña Elvira straightened her back. Not everyone can do that, she said. Her tone was no longer accusatory, it was a warning. That's what's going to get you in trouble. Do you understand? Aurelia swallowed. I don't do it to show off, she said defensively. I know, replied Doña Elvira, and even so, people will use it against you. Everything here is used against you. Aurelia felt that the house was a beautiful cage. So should I play dumb, she asked, her voice rising slightly. Doña Elvira looked at her as if that question had given her hope. No, she replied, but you must be careful what you say and to whom. Aurelia lowered her gaze. I don't know anyone here, she said. I'm enough for now, replied Doña Elvira. The door opened again, this time slowly. It was Ramiro, the administrator. He was holding a piece of paper and looked tense. Doña Elvira, he said, not even looking at Aurelia. Downstairs now. Doña Elvira pressed her lips together. Again, ye didn't. Again she let go. Ramiro held out the sheet of paper. This just arrived, he said. Doña Elvira took the sheet and read it quickly. Her face changed slightly, but Aurelia noticed, because she was learning to read other people's gestures in order to survive. "What is it?" Aurelia asked, unable to help herself. Doña Elvira didn't answer but looked at Ramiro and then at Aurelia as if weighing up whether to say something. Ramiro spoke first, in a manner that suggested he believed he controlled the house. "It's an invitation," he said, "a meeting, and it comes from someone who cannot be ignored." Aurelia felt her heart tighten. "For the prince?" she asked. "For His Highness," Ramiro confirmed. "And it's not just any invitation. It's a question disguised as a courtesy." Doña Elvira slowly folded the sheet of paper. "Who sent it?" asked Aurelia, her voice almost gone. Ramiro hesitated for a moment, as if the impact were part of the message. "The Marquise of Valcarcel," he said, and the name fell like a cold coin. In the note, she politely inquired about the young woman the prince had picked up off the street. Gaspar didn't need to read the invitation twice. He understood the blow hidden in the paper at first glance. "The Marquise of Valcarcel," he repeated without emotion. Ramiro nodded, satisfied that the name had done its job. "She is the person who decides what becomes rumor and what becomes fact, Your Highness." Doña Elvira stood stiffly with the folded letter in her hand, as though it were on fire. "What exactly does it say?" Gaspar asked. Ramiro stretched his neck, eager to recite it. "That she hopes to see His Highness at her gathering this week. She adds very politely that Seville is concerned about his health and that of his family. Then she asks if the young woman found on the street needs any assistance." Gaspar let out a short laugh. "Charity," he murmured. What a dirty word to clean up. Doña Elvira spoke carefully. "Your Highness," she said, "if you don't go, she will come to this house." Ramiro frowned. "If she wants to," said Doña Elvira, "and she will want to." Gaspar stared at the paper as if it were a small but dangerous animal. "Let her come," he said at last. Ramiro opened his eyes wide. "Your Highness, that is opening the door to judgment." Gaspar looked up coldly. "And you think judgment is not already outside?" he asked. Ramiro pressed his lips together. "Can I deny her access?" he insisted. "Respectfully, with apologies. Say that you are indisposed. End the conversation, and she will fill in the blanks," Gaspar replied. "No, if she wants to talk, I will listen to her here, so that she cannot twist my words to her liking." Doña Elvira sighed in resignation, but did not argue. She knew when she was not going to win. Gaspar walked towards the staircase. He stopped halfway up without turning around. "Yes, Your Highness. Make sure the young lady doesn't hear any of this," Doña Elvira ordered. Doña Elvira swallowed hard. "I'll do my best." Gaspar climbed the stairs slowly. He was as calm as he had been when he was consumed by anger. In the room, Aurelia was still lying down. She had been dozing, but the word Marquise had jolted her awake. She sat up slowly when she saw Doña Elvira enter. "What's going on?" she asked. Doña Elvira closed the door carefully. "The world has found out about you," she said bluntly. Aurelia felt a chill in her stomach. "See you?" "I haven't gone out," she murmured. "You don't need to go out to be pointed at," replied Doña Elvira. "They point at you because you exist here." Aurelia clutched the sheet. "Then I'm leaving," she said quickly, as if saying it would make it happen. Doña Elvira looked at her sternly. "Where to?" she asked again, as if the word go tired her. Aurelia swallowed. "Anywhere. I don't want them to ruin him." Doña Elvira raised an eyebrow. "Ruin him?" she repeated. "Him?" Aurelia looked down, feeling uncomfortable. "Because of me," insisted Doña Elvira. She approached the bed. "Listen to me carefully," she said. "His Highness is not brought down by a sick girl. He is brought down by what people choose to believe. And that is not something you or I can control." Aurelia felt her eyes well up with tears. "Then what do I do?" Doña Elvira hesitated for a moment, then replied, "You must do the only thing you can do. Stay on your feet as much as possible and talk as little as you can." Aurelia nodded, but anxiety got the better of her. "Who is this Marquise?" she asked. Doña Elvira grimaced. "A lady who smiles as if she's offering you tea, but is actually counting your fingers to see which one she can cut off with a single word," she replied. Aurelia shuddered. "She's coming." Doña Elvira wasn't lying. She might come. And if she does, you mustn't show yourself. Aurelia pressed her lips together. "I'm not a coward," she said, though she wasn't so sure. Doña Elvira snorted. This isn't street courage, she said. This is etiquette, and etiquette kills with smiles. Aurelia remained silent, then spoke in a low voice. I know how to speak, she said. I know how to behave. Doña Elvira looked at her with the same suspicion as before. I've noticed that, she replied, and that's why I'm worried. Aurelia felt a twinge of pain. I'm not doing it to deceive anyone. Then don't deceive anyone, said Doña Elvira. Be quiet. Aurelia wanted to protest, but she was bent over slightly by a cough. Doña Elvira approached with a glass of water. Slowly, she ordered. Aurelia took a sip. She breathed as best she could. Doña Elvira, she said, barely catching her breath. If that lady comes and asks who I am, what will you say? Doña Elvira remained silent. The most useful truth, she replied, that you are ill and that His Highness took pity on you. Aurelia swallowed hard. And what about my last name? Doña Elvira didn't answer right away. Then she said dryly, don't mention that. Aurelia felt her heart skip a beat. What down? Doña Elvira leaned in and lowered her voice. Because your surname could be a spark, she said, and this house is full of social gunpowder. Aurelia closed her eyes and clutched the sheet. I didn't want anyone to know anything, she murmured. Well, they already know enough to come sniffing around, replied Doña Elvira. And when they sniff, they bite. Hours later, the atmosphere in the house changed. You could tell by the footsteps, by the tone of the servants, and by the way Doña Elvira gave orders without raising her voice but without tolerating any dissent. That vase over there. Make sure the small living room is ready and that no one is left in the hallways. A new maid asked nervously, Who is coming, Doña Elvira? Doña Elvira looked at her as if the question were an indiscretion. Someone who does not forgive mistakes, she replied. So today, make sure you don't make any. Aurelia listened to everything from her room. Although she couldn't see, she could hear, and the sound of the house preparing for a visit made her feel more ashamed than her illness did. She felt like an ugly piece of furniture that they were hiding. There was a soft knock at the door. It wasn't Doña Elvira. It was Fray Tomas, the chaplain. May I come in, my child? He asked from outside. Aurelia took a deep breath. Yes, said Tomas. He entered calmly with that unhurried gaze. You're feeling better, he observed. I feel less dead, replied Aurelia, attempting a crooked smile. The chaplain sat down nearby without intruding. That's already an improvement, he said. Then he looked at her intently. I heard you're restless. Aurelia pressed her lips together. A lady is coming, she said. I feel like everything is going to turn against me. Fray Tomas looked at her. It's likely, he said. He said without softening his tone. Aurelia froze. Then you breathe, he replied. And don't anticipate the blow. Aurelia exhaled slowly. Why is he doing this, she asked. The question hurt as it left her lips. Why is he defending me? Fray Tomas took a moment. I don't think he's defending you out of habit, he replied. Men like him aren't moved by habit. They're moved by something that shatters their calm. Aurelia lowered her gaze. I don't want to break anything for him. Fray Tomas nodded as if he understood. Then don't burden yourself with guilt, he said. Guilt doesn't heal. It only imprisons. Aurelia clenched her fingers. If only I were someone else, she murmured. Everything would be easier. Fray Tomas looked at her firmly. You are not someone else, he said, and you don't have to be. Downstairs in the hall, Gaspar stood waiting. He didn't sit down. It was a minor detail, but in that world, details were everything. Ramiro stood tensely to one side, repeatedly adjusting his suit cuffs. Your Highness, he murmured. If you'll allow me, whatever she says goes. Shut up, said Gaspar without raising his voice. Ramiro obeyed. The front door opened. The Marquise was announced with a formality that sounded like a bell. She entered as if the space belonged to her, impeccably dressed with a measured smile, her eyes surprised by nothing. Your Highness, she said, bowing her head with a respect that seemed precise rather than sincere. What an honor to be received by you, Marquise, replied Gaspar, bowing slightly. He had not expected her visit. The Marquise smiled a little more. Good friends do not wait for an invitation when there is unrest, she said. Seville, after all, is restless. Gaspar did not move. Seville is always restless about something, he replied. The Marquise advanced with soft steps. She looked around as if admiring the room, but in reality she was counting the exits. "What a well-kept house," she said. Doña Elvira's touch is evident. Doña Elvira, who was nearby, gave a stiff bow. "It is my duty," she said. "And you fulfill your duty with excellence," replied the Marquise, still smiling. Then she looked at Gaspar. "I have come because I am concerned about your health, Your Highness. You have distanced yourself from court, and that is respected. But when rumors arise, people become restless." Gaspar held her gaze. "What rumor brought you here?" he asked directly. The Marquise let out a low chuckle as if he were mischievous. "You are so frank," she said. "It's said that you picked up a sick young woman in the street, took her home, and have been caring for her ever since." Ramiro clenched his jaw. Doña Elvira froze. Gaspar did not deny it. "It's true," he said. The Marquise raised her eyebrows in well-rehearsed surprise. "What an unusual gesture," she commented, "and how dangerous in these times. Not for you, Your Highness, but for the things that malicious people might invent." Gaspar crossed his arms. "Then tell them to invent less," he said. The Marquise smiled patiently. "Ah, if only people would obey," she sighed. "But they don't. That's why one tries to steer the conversation towards what is right." Gaspar looked at her coldly. What would be right would be for her to stop talking about it. She smiled patiently. "Ah, if only people would obey," she sighed. "But they don't. That's why one tries to steer the conversation in the right direction." Gaspar looked at her coldly. The right thing for the Marquise to do would be to take a couple of steps as if thinking. The right thing would be to find out who the young woman is. Her bird finally said, "Not to judge her, but to protect her and you." "Not to judge her, but to protect her and you." Gaspar replied without hesitation. "She is ill," he said. "That is enough." The Marquise bowed her head tenderly. "It is enough for charity," she said, "but not for society." Gaspar did not move. "I don't live for society," he replied. The Marquise looked at him with false compassion. "That's what you say today," she replied. "But the world catches up with you even if you close your doors. If the young woman has a murky past, your house will become the stage, Your Highness. And you have already suffered enough." Gaspar clenched his jaw. Ramiro lowered his gaze. Doña Elvira looked at the floor. That phrase touched on something left unsaid. Gaspar took a small step forward. "I came to talk," said the Marquise, her voice dangerous and calm. "If you came to talk about my pain as currency to buy my obedience, you've come to the wrong house." The Marquise didn't lose her smile, she just changed her tone. "Forgive me," she said. "My intention is to spare you further grief." Gaspar held her gaze. "My intention is to prevent that young woman from dying alone," replied the Marquise. She clasped her hands together. "How noble," she murmured, "but nobility also protects itself." "Tell me, Your Highness, does the young woman have a surname?" Doña Elvira took a deep breath. Gaspar answered without looking at anyone. "Her name is Aurelia," he said. The Marquise bowed her head. "A pretty name," she commented. "Leave the rest to me." Gaspar paused for a second. "That doesn't matter," he said at last. The Marquise smiled as if she had just won something. "It does matter," she corrected softly. "Because if it doesn't matter, then you'll introduce her to me. If it doesn't matter, the young woman can come out for a moment, say hello and thank you, and then everyone can calm down." Ramiro took a small step towards Gaspar, as if asking for permission to intervene. "Your Highness," Gaspar murmured, raising a hand. Ramiro fell back. Gaspar looked at the Marquise. "She's ill," he repeated. "This is no entertainment." The Marquise spread her hands. "Then say it yourself," he insisted, "because otherwise people will think you are hiding her out of shame." Doña Elvira pressed her lips together. That word was poison. Gaspar took the blow without flinching. "I am not ashamed to give her shelter," he said. "Of course not," replied the Marquise. "But people won't see it that way. They'll see it as a stain. And even if it's unfair, a stain becomes history." Gaspar leaned forward slightly, approaching without invading her space. "That's a threat," he said. The Marquise. She let out a little laugh. "It's a warning," she replied. "Threats are vulgar." Gaspar stood up straight without yielding. "I don't respond to disguised threats," he said. The Marquise looked at him with a calmness that was frightening. Then at least let me help, he offered. I have contacts. I could find you a discreet place, a convent, perhaps, where you will be cared for with dignity and won't have to bear the burden of, Gaspar said dryly. The Marquise blinked for the first time, looking slightly imperfect. No, she repeated. No, Gaspar insisted. She will stay here until she is well. The Marquise regained her smile, but her eyes hardened. Your Highness, she said with cutting gentleness, your kindness honors you. But kindness without prudence comes at a price. Gaspar bowed slightly. Then I will pay, he replied. The Marquise stood still for a moment, then turned to Doña Elvira. Doña Elvira, she said sweetly, I am sure you will take care of the young lady with all your experience. I am doing my duty, replied Doña Elvira. I am glad, replied the Marquise, because fragile girls are often easily confused. Sometimes even they themselves are confused about what they deserve. Doña Elvira clenched her teeth. In this house, no one is confused about respect, she said more firmly than usual. The Marquise smiled as if she understood. How beautifully you put it, she murmured. Then she looked at Gaspar again. Well, I won't take up any more of your time. I just wanted to see the person behind the rumor. Gaspar held her gaze. You have seen her, he said. The Marquise bowed elegantly. I've seen her, she repeated, and I hope for your sake that the young woman is who you think she is. Ramiro accompanied the Marquise to the exit. As she passed, she murmured just loudly enough for him to hear, but not for the others to notice. How stubborn he is, she said softly. And why are you alone? Ramiro looked down, feeling uncomfortable. When the door closed, the room fell into a heavy silence. Doña Elvira spoke first. She'll be back, said Gaspar. He didn't deny it. Yes, he replied, and she'll speak. Ramiro returned looking pale. Highness, he said, she didn't come to ask. She came to make her mark. Gaspar looked at him. I know, he said. That's why you don't turn your back on her. You look her straight in the eye. Ramiro swallowed hard, and the young woman asked, What are you going to do with her when the rumor gets bigger? Gaspar clenched his jaw. The same thing, he replied. Take care of her. Ramiro sighed and ventured, Altessa, you say that as if it were simple. But if the Marquise smells a secret, she'll find out. And if she does? Gaspar took a step closer. What do you mean? Asked Ramiro. He hesitated, then spoke more quietly. There are people in Seville who don't forgive stains, he said. Not all stains are lies. Doña Elvira cut him off with a glance. Enough, she said. She's not here for your venom. Gaspar raised a hand. He didn't say anything. He let Ramiro speak. Ramiro clutched the papers in his hand as if they gave him courage. I'm saying we don't know who he is, he blurted out. If he brings something, a seal, a document, a link, the Marquise will find it, and you, Your Highness, will be caught in the middle. Doña Elvira tensed. Gaspar looked at her sideways. What is it? He asked slowly. Doña Elvira did not respond immediately, merely holding his gaze with a firmness that was almost defiant. Servants' matters, she said at last. There's nothing you need to hear now. Gaspar did not move, but the air changed. Doña Elvira, he said, his voice no longer conversational. If there is anything that could put that young woman at risk, I need to know. Doña Elvira clenched her jaw, then regained her composure. She is ill, Your Highness, she repeated. That is risk enough. Gaspar looked at her for a moment longer, then turned towards the staircase. I'm going to see her, he said. Ramiro tried to stop him. Your Highness, come up now after this visit. Gaspar didn't look back at him. After this visit is when I go up the most, he replied. Upstairs. Aurelia was sitting on the edge of the bed, trembling with exhaustion. She had heard parts of the conversation, but not all of it. She heard her name on other people's lips. The word stain in the tone of that woman she didn't know but already hated. Doña Elvira entered first with a stern face. Did you hear her? She asked. Aurelia hesitated. I didn't mean to, she said. But the walls. Doña Elvira let out a breath. I told you not to eavesdrop, she complained. I wasn't eavesdropping, Aurelia replied, pressing her lips together. I only heard. Doña Elvira remained silent, annoyed, but not entirely with Aurelia. She approached and smoothed the sheet, as if this would calm her down. The Marquise wants to see you, she said. Aurelia felt a hollow in her chest. I don't want to see her, she replied. Fine, said Doña Elvira. Why won't you see her? Aurelia swallowed. She's going to send me to a convent, she said, trembling. I heard that word. Doña Elvira looked at her sharply. As long as Her Highness commands, she replied. Aurelia exhaled, but the fear did not go away. She's going to put you to bed, she murmured. Doña Elvira remained still. Yes, she said, it will cost you. The door opened without a knock. Gaspar entered, looking serious, his eyes darker than before. Aurelia struggled to her feet as if her body had sensed a power not its own. Gaspar said nothing when he saw her trying to stand up. Sit down. Aurelia obeyed, feeling embarrassed. Gaspar looked at Doña Elvira. Leave us, he said. Doña Elvira hesitated. Then she nodded and left, closing the door carefully behind her. Aurelia was left alone with Gaspar. The silence crushed her more than any words could have done. I'm sorry for what's happening, she said quickly. Gaspar looked at her as if her apology made no sense. What did you do? He asked. Aurelia froze. Exist, she murmured. Gaspar clenched his jaw. Don't apologize to me for breathing, he said. Aurelia looked at him, taken aback by his tone. A woman came, she said, trying not to tremble. I heard her talking about me as if I were a rumor, Gaspar added. Aurelia nodded, her eyes moist. Yes. Gaspar approached the bed, but did not sit down. He stood as if his body would not allow him to rest. Her name is Marquesa de Valcarcel, he said. She likes to decide who is worthy of being seen. Aurelia lowered her gaze. I am not worthy, she said. As she said it, she hated herself. Gaspar raised his hand not to touch her, but to stop her from speaking. Enough, he ordered. Aurelia swallowed. You don't understand, she said, her voice breaking. I don't belong here. Gaspar stared at her. And where do you belong? He asked. Aurelia opened her mouth, but she had no answer because the street was not a place of belonging. It was a place of punishment. Gaspar took a deep breath. Listen to me, he said. You're staying here until you're well. No one is coming in to see you without my permission. Aurelia clenched her fingers into the sheet. That will make them talk more, she murmured. Let them talk, Gaspar replied. Aurelia looked up desperately. You don't know what they can do with words, she said. I do. With words, they can close doors on you. They can take away your job. They can take things away from you. Her voice broke. Gaspar looked at her, and for a moment his expression softened. It didn't soften completely, but it shifted. They took many things from you, he said. More quietly, Aurelia nodded, unable to help herself. They even took away my right to be sick, she whispered. Gaspar clenched his jaw. Who? He asked. Aurelia froze. I can't, she said. Tell me, he insisted, his voice taking on a controlled edge. Aurelia closed her eyes. Fear rose in her chest. If I tell you, they'll send me back, she murmured. No, said Gaspar Tajante, I won't send you back. Aurelia looked at him, and part of her wanted to believe him, but another older and more tired part couldn't. You say that today, she said, trembling. But what about when the court? Gaspar tensed at the word. The court doesn't rule here, he replied, although his tone carried weight. Aurelia swallowed hard. A question she shouldn't have asked slipped out. Why did you leave? She asked. Why are you here and not there? Gaspar stood still. The silence grew. Aurelia felt she had crossed a line. I'm sorry, she said immediately. That wasn't me. Gaspar cut her off without raising his voice. Over there, everything rots with a smile, he said. And because I've already seen what the court does to anything that gets in its way. Aurelia felt a chill. Like me, she murmured. Gaspar didn't answer, but he looked at her as if the comparison had hurt him. Aurelia breathed heavily. The words gathered in her throat. I don't want to be your hindrance, she said more firmly. If I can walk, I'll leave. Gaspar looked at her, and for the first time, genuine frustration showed on his face. Where to? He repeated. Aurelia pressed her lips together. She didn't want to say nowhere. I'll look for work, she said. In a kitchen, in a house with Guillermo. Gaspar watched her. With that cough? He asked. Aurelia looked down, feeling humiliated. I won't cough anymore. she said as if it were a decision she had made. Gaspar exhaled through his nose. You're stubborn, he said. Aurelia, she bit her lip. It's all I have left, she confessed. Gaspar stood still for a moment. Then he spoke more softly. They told me I was stubborn too, he murmured. They said I was going to destroy myself by not doing the right thing. Aurelia looked up. And what was the right thing? She asked without thinking. Gaspar didn't answer right away. His eyes hardened. To keep quiet, he said at last. Aurelia felt a lump in her throat. I kept quiet too, she admitted, and that's why they left me. Gaspar looked at her as if her words had struck him. Aurelia swallowed. The air became heavy. She wanted to change the subject, but fear overtook her. Can that marquise force you? She asked. Gaspar shook his head slightly. She can't force me, he said, but she can make things messy. Aurelia clenched her fingers. So I'm the excuse, she said. Gaspar looked at her intently. You're not an excuse, he corrected. You're a person. Aurelia lowered her gaze. The word person sounded strange when applied to her. Gaspar took a deep breath. I want to know something, he said, changing his tone. Doña Elvira has hidden things from me, and Ramiro hints at others. Were you carrying anything with you when I found you? Aurelia felt the blood drain from her face. The medallion, she murmured. Gaspar watched her alertly. Where is it? Aurelia hesitated. She didn't want to betray Doña Elvira, but she also didn't want to lie to him. Doña Elvira hid it, she said at last, so that no one would see it. Gaspar clenched his jaw. Why didn't she want anyone to see it? He asked. Aurelia swallowed. Because it has a seal on it, she whispered. Gaspar stood still. He stood still. Whose? He asked slowly. Aurelia closed her eyes. The fever returned slightly, or perhaps it was just fear. I don't know for sure, she said. I only know that they gave it to me to protect me. Gaspar breathed carefully. Who gave it to you? He insisted. Aurelia swallowed. A woman, she said. The one who raised me told me that if something ever happened to me, I shouldn't let it go. She said that the seal was proof that I hadn't finished the sentence, but she didn't know how to say it without sounding crazy. Gaspar waited. What do you mean, he asked. Oh, he asked. Aurelia opened her moist eyes. That I was nothing, she whispered. She hated herself for the word, but it was the only one that came out, that I came from people who didn't want me around. Gaspar clenched his jaw. And why didn't they want you around? He asked. Aurelia shook her head. I don't know, she said. Or maybe I just don't remember. I just remember them telling me to keep that name to myself. Gaspar leaned forward slightly. What name? He asked. Aurelia felt her throat close up. The image of the woman who had raised her returned, bringing her voice back with it. Don't say it. No, not here. Never. Aurelia clutched the sheet. So es no debo, she murmured. Gaspar didn't shout, but his voice was firm, as if he were holding on to something slipping away. If that name can put you in danger, I need it, he said. Aurelia breathed heavily. A cough rose in her throat, but she suppressed it. She swallowed and then, without meaning to, as if her mouth had got ahead of her better judgment, she whispered Almenara, in a broken voice. Gaspar didn't react as Aurelia had expected. Sushreda. He didn't raise his voice or pull away. He just stood still as if the surname had entered the room without knocking. De Almenara, he repeated slowly. Aurelia felt her heart pounding in her chest. I shouldn't have said it, she murmured. It just slipped out. Gaspar looked at her with tense eyes. Who told you that name? He asked. She did, replied Aurelia. The woman who raised me. What was her name? Aurelia swallowed hard. She could see her face in her mind's eye, and it hurt. Catalina, she said, just Catalina. I called her Nana Catalina. Gaspar nodded slightly. Where is she? He asked. Aurelia looked down. I don't know, she confessed. Before I got sick, she stopped coming. They sent me to live with other people for a while, and then I didn't see her anymore. Gaspar clenched his jaw. Who sent you? Aurelia insisted. She closed her eyes for a moment. I don't know their full names, she said desperately. I only know that every time I asked, they told me not to, and to be grateful. Gaspar exhaled through his nose, as if annoyed with the whole world. And where were you working when you got sick? he asked, changing the subject and sounding more controlled. Aurelia hesitated. She looked at the door as if the house could hear her. In a house near the river, she said. I was helping in the kitchen. It wasn't the first time. Gaspar looked at her intently. Tell me the street, he asked. Aurelia said it quietly. Gaspar repeated it to himself to remember it. Good, he replied. You're not going anywhere. You're not going out, and you're not talking to anyone with that name. Do you understand? Aurelia nodded quickly. Yes. Gaspar held her gaze for a few more seconds, then spoke more softly. What you just said is not a small matter, he said, and you're not alone. Aurelia felt her throat tighten. I've always been alone, she whispered. Gaspar looked at her as if her words had hurt him personally. Today, however, he didn't respond. Instead, he rang the bell to call her. Doña Elvira came in immediately, as if she had been standing right next to the door. What happened? She asked, looking at Aurelia first. Gaspar didn't beat around the bush. I need to see the medallion, he said. Doña Elvira tensed. Your Highness, Gaspar repeated, still not shouting. Doña Elvira pressed her lips together, reached into her apron, and took out the cloth containing the medallion. She didn't hand it to him directly, but left it on the table, as if doing so would enable her to retain some control. Gaspar took it carefully, turned it over, and looked at it intently. Aurelia watched his face and saw his expression harden. Do you recognize it? She asked fearfully. Gaspar paused for a moment. I recognize the style, he said, and I recognize the danger. Doña Elvira crossed her arms. I said it was gunpowder, she blurted out. Gaspar looked up at Doña Elvira. Then why didn't you tell me? Asked Doña Elvira, holding her ground. Because you didn't need another reason to fight with half the world, he replied. And because the girl was delirious, I wasn't going to judge her for what was hanging around her neck. Gaspar clenched his jaw. I understand, he said at last. It didn't sound kind, but it was fair. Then he looked at Aurelia. Do you have anything else? A letter, a piece of paper? Aurelia blinked nervously. I don't, she said, her voice trembling. Doña Elvira looked at her as if she already knew. Say it, she ordered. Aurelia brought a hand to her chest, touching the fabric of her clothes. There is something, she admitted, but I don't know if it's still there. Gaspar took a step closer. Where? Aurelia pointed to the old shawl folded at the foot of the bed. There, said Doña Elvira. She took it and examined it with expert hands, carefully inserting her fingers into a poorly made seam that had clearly been repaired many times. She pulled out a small, worn envelope with a faded stamp. Aurelia held her breath. That can't be opened, she said, trembling. Gaspar didn't open it. He held it as if it weighed more than metal. Why might buy that? Why, he asked. Because she said only if I had no one left, Aurelia whispered. I thought I heard her voice break. Doña Elvira looked at her sharply, but without mockery. You have no one left, she said dryly. That's in the past. Now open the door to the truth, or it will come crashing down on you without asking permission. Aurelia squeezed her eyes shut as if gathering courage. I don't want this to hurt you, she said, looking at Gaspar. Gaspar held her gaze. Whatever it does to me will hurt me, he replied. But I won't let them destroy you with silence. Aurelia swallowed hard. Open it, she said softly. Gaspar carefully broke the seal. He took out a folded sheet of paper. The handwriting was firm and old, not Aurelia's. Aurelia looked at it as if it were an apparition. Gaspar read it aloud to himself first. Seeing that Aurelia was trying to understand from his face, he began to read aloud. If this reaches you, he read, it is because the world has already hurt you as I feared. Don't hate me for hiding you. I hid you so that you could live. Aurelia clutched the sheet. Catalina's voice rang out in those words. Gaspar continued, your real name is not a disgrace. It is proof you are the daughter of Don Esteban de Almenara. I owe you no lies. I owe you protection. Aurelia felt the air leave her body. She stammered. Doña Elvira looked at her as if to say, breathe. Gaspar continued, more seriously, your mother was an honest woman in her own way, and she paid for it. I will not say her name here. Not out of fear, but out of respect. If you ever need to claim what is yours, Look for the notary, Salcedo in Triana. He has a copy of the registry and knows how to give it to you without causing a scandal. Gaspar lowered the sheet for a moment and looked at Aurelia, trying to discern whether this truth was saving or breaking her. Tears filled Aurelia's eyes, but they did not fall. They stayed there as if they were afraid too. This meant that Aurelia couldn't finish. Gaspar looked back at the letter and read the final paragraph. Don't seek revenge, seek life. And if someone offers you shelter with respect, don't reject it out of pride. Pride also kills, but with a virtuous face. Your seal is not for showing off. It is a reminder that no one has the right to leave you on the ground. Gaspar folded the letter slowly. The silence became heavy. Aurelia breathed as if it hurt. I didn't know, she said at last. I thought it was just a story to make me feel better. She couldn't find the word. Gaspar said it for her. Invisible, sir, he murmured. Aurelia nodded, crying silently. Doña Elvira held the letter in her hands for a moment, as if to check that it was real. No wonder, she said, more to herself than to anyone else. No wonder they wanted you out. Aurelia looked up suddenly. They wanted me out because of that? She asked, frightened. Gaspar put the letter in his jacket pocket. They wanted you out because you have proof and because there are people who would rather erase than explain, he said. Aurelia shuddered. So it wasn't just because I fell ill, she murmured. So they let me go. Doña Elvira snorted. When a person is no longer useful, they throw them away without getting their hands dirty. That's Seville when it gets fancy, she said. Gaspar raised a hand, cutting her off. Enough, he said. He looked at Doña Elvira. I need Fray Tomas, and I need the doctor. Doña Elvira nodded and left quickly. Aurelia looked at Gaspar fearfully. You didn't have to get involved, she said, trembling. Now this is serious. Gaspar stared at her. Big was letting you die, he replied. This is just the truth. Aurelia swallowed hard. What are you going to do with that truth? She asked. Gaspar took a moment to respond. When he did, he was strangely calm. We're going to set things straight, he said. No scandal, no circus, but in order. Aurelia pressed her lips together. What if the Marquise finds out? She asked. Gaspar didn't look away. She'll find out, he replied. The difference is that it won't be from her. Fray Tomas arrived first. He entered with the same calm demeanor, but when he saw Aurelia's face, he realized that the conversation was no longer about fever. Your Highness, he greeted her. Then he looked at Aurelia. My daughter. Gaspar showed him the letter without handing it over. I need discretion, he always said. I understand, replied the chaplain. Gaspar spoke directly. There is a notary in Triana, said Salcedo. I want you to visit him today and ask questions without raising any suspicion. Confirm whether there is a record related to the Almenara house. Fray Tomas nodded as if he had already seen many hidden things and showed no surprise. I will do it, he said. What else? Gaspar clenched his jaw. I want to know where she worked, he said, looking at Aurelia. And who took her out? I want facts. Fray Tomas looked at Aurelia gently. Can you tell me the name of the house? He asked. Aurelia tried. She gave the name of the owner as she remembered it imperfectly. Doña Jacinta, she said. People called her Doña Jacinta, the one with the tiles. I don't know if Gaspar nodded. That's enough to start with, he said. Then he looked at Aurelia. You're not going. Aurelia swallowed. I can, she began. No, said Gaspar. Aurelia lowered her gaze. Yes, Your Highness, she replied, lacking the strength to argue. Shortly after, the doctor arrived with his briefcase and a troubled expression. What's going on? He asked as he entered. Gaspar was direct. I want to know if her condition could have been aggravated by something they gave her, he said. A remedy? A tonic? Something. The doctor frowned. That's a delicate matter, he murmured. I can't make accusations without wanting accusations. Gaspar cut him off. I want signs. The doctor approached Aurelia. He checked her pulse and breathing and examined her tongue and eyes. Aurelia let him do it, but she was embarrassed. They gave you something for your cough, the doctor said suddenly, looking at her. Right, Aurelia. She blinked. A syrup, she whispered. They said it would calm me down. The doctor pursed his lips. Did it calm you down? He asked. Aurelia thought for a moment. It made me sleepy, she replied. And then I woke up feeling worse, but I didn't know. The doctor looked at Gaspar. That kind of poorly measured shrupa leaves a person weak, he explained. I'm not saying it was intentional, I'm saying it was negligence. People think that the sleeping is healing. Doña Elvira, who had just entered, let out a sound of disgust. Convenient negligence, she muttered. The doctor looked at her angrily. I'm talking about medicine, he said. Gaspar raised his hand. You're both right, he said. It doesn't matter if it was clumsiness or convenience. They let her fall. Aurelia clutched the sheet. I didn't want to be a burden, she said in a faint voice. Gaspar looked at her. The burden was cruelty, he replied. That same day, without Aurelia leaving her bed, the outside world moved for her. Gaspar sent a trusted maid to accompany Fray Tomas. He sent Doña Elvira to carefully check the shawl and clothes for any hidden compartments. Doña Elvira grumbled, but obeyed as if the task were a mission. Ramiro tried to stand in the hallway. Your Highness, he exclaimed, blocking his way. Where are you sending the chaplain with servants? The Marquise. Gaspar looked at him coldly. Since when do you tell me what I can do in my own house? Ramiro asked. He tensed up. I'm just trying to prevent your tongue, Gaspar cut him off, and prevent you from talking about Aurelia as if she were an object. Ramiro pressed his lips together. Aurelia, he repeated, as if even mentioning her name was giving her too much credit. Gaspar took a step closer. Yes, said Aurelia. Ramiro lowered his gaze, defeated by rank. In the afternoon, Fray Tomas returned with a serious, though not alarmed expression. Doña Elvira received him before going up to her room, as if she wanted to be informed first in order to soften the blow. She asked curtly, It exists, replied Fray Tomas. Nosari Salcedo did not read out the contents, but confirmed that he kept a record relating to a girl protected by a woman named Catalina. He said it as if he didn't want to. Doña Elvira clenched her jaw. So the letter is real, she murmured. Fray Tomas nodded. And the house where she worked, he added. It also exists, Doña Jacinta, I asked carefully. They say the young woman fell ill, so they fired her. They didn't want any risks. No one admits to leaving her on the street, but nor do they strongly deny it. Doña Elvira snorted. Cowards, she blurted out. Fray Tomas looked at her calmly. It's common, said Gaspar, who had been listening from the hallway and now came closer. Any more details? He asked. Fray Tomas lowered his voice. I heard something, he said, that someone had paid for the syrup. It wasn't Doña Jacinta. It was a man who didn't give his name. He just left coins and told them to calm down. The word soon sounded hurried. Gaspar clenched his jaw. They described him. Fine hat, good cloak, replied Fray Tomas. He wasn't a servant or a poor man. Doña Elvira crossed her arms. So there was interest, she murmured. Gaspar took a deep breath to control himself. All right, he said. No rushing, no confrontation, just facts. Doña Elvira raised an eyebrow, and the Marquise asked a question. Gaspar looked at her. She's going to offer her a convent, he said, or a discreet way out so she can look like the savior. Doña Elvira frowned. She had already proposed it, he said. Gaspar nodded. And she's going to repeat it, he replied. But now we have a letter and a notary. It's not just rumor against rumor. Doña Elvira clicked her tongue. That's not always enough, she warned. Gaspar held her gaze. It's enough for me, he said. He went up to his room. Aurelia was awake and waiting for him, as if her body had sensed his return. What did you find out? She asked bluntly. Gaspar stopped by the bed. That the letter is true, he replied, and that there is a notary who can confirm it. Aurelia brought a trembling hand to her mouth. Then I couldn't finish. Gaspar spoke calmly. You are who you are, he said. That doesn't make you better or worse, but it gives you defense. Aurelia lowered her gaze. I don't want to use it to humiliate anyone, Gaspar murmured. He looked at her seriously, and she felt sustained by it. That speaks well of you, he said, and it doesn't mean you should allow yourself to be humiliated. Aurelia squeezed her eyes shut. I just want to live in peace, she confessed. Gaspar exhaled through his nose. Me too, he admitted. This simple confession sounded strange coming from him. Aurelia looked up. Then why don't you? She asked in a low voice. Could you just send me away? Gaspar stood still. He looked at her as if the idea was unbearable. Because that would be repeating the same thing, and he said, it would be saying, stay away so I can be comfortable. Aurelia swallowed. You don't know me, she insisted. I could be a problem. Gaspar leaned towards her slightly without touching her. You're already a problem for those who wanted you to disappear, he replied. That's not your fault. Aurelia remained silent, then spoke in a trembling voice. What will happen to me? Gaspar asked. He looked at her intently. First, you get better, he said. Second, we'll go to the notary, calmly and discreetly. Thirdly, you can decide what you want. Aurelia swallowed hard. Decide, she repeated, as if the word were too big for her. Gaspar nodded. Yes, he said. Decide. Aurelia clutched the sheet. I don't know how to decide, she confessed. Gaspar looked at her, then said more quietly, I know one thing. Aurelia looked at him, restraining herself. What? Gaspar paused, as if choosing the least dangerous way to say it. I'm not going to push you out onto the street to shut the world up, he said. And if anyone treats you like trash again, I'll stop them. Aurelia felt her chest fill with something hot and painful. Even if they point fingers at you? Asked Gaspar. He held her gaze. They already do, she replied. At least let it be for something worthwhile. Aurelia let out a small, embarrassed sigh. I'm sorry, she said. Gaspar shook his head. No, he replied. Not that. Aurelia took a deep breath, trying to control herself. I don't want a convent, she blurted out, as if the idea was suffocating her. I don't want to be hidden away as if I were something shameful. Gaspar became serious. You're not going to a convent, he said. Aurelia looked at him incredulously. I promise, Gaspar said, lifting his chin slightly. I promise, he said. Doña Elvira entered without knocking, as if the promise had pulled her in. Your Highness, she said. The Marquis sent word. Gaspar didn't move. What does she want now, he asked. Doña Elvira. She pressed her lips together. To offer help, she said with dry irony. She says she knows of a quiet place. She's concerned about your reputation. Gaspar laughed humorlessly. Tell her my reputation takes care of itself, he replied. Doña Elvira nodded, but did not leave immediately. She looked at Aurelia, and there was something new in her gaze. Not open tenderness, but a kind of rough respect. Aurelia, said Doña Elvira, testing the name. Aurelia looked up. Yes. Doña Elvira hesitated for a second. Today, they didn't leave you alone, she said as if the words were difficult to say. Aurelia swallowed. Thank you, she replied softly. Doña Elvira clicked her tongue. Don't thank me, she said. It annoys me. Gaspar looked at her, giving her an almost imperceptible nod of approval. Doña Elvira took a deep breath. I'm going downstairs to answer, she said, and I'm going to do it without trembling. Gaspar nodded. Do it, he replied. Doña Elvira left. Aurelia stared at the door, still trembling, but inside she felt a sense of calm settling in. It wasn't happiness. It was something else. For the first time, she felt that the truth could be more than just a burden. It could also be a key. Gaspar spoke again, more quietly. I don't want to break that, he said. I want you to rest. If you're better tomorrow, I'll bring the notary here. You don't go out. You don't expose yourself. Aurelia nodded. Oh yes, she murmured. If all this is true, if I am someone's daughter, that obliges me to something. Gaspar looked at her calmly. It doesn't oblige you to be like them, he replied. It gives you the right not to be treated as inferior. Aurelia swallowed. I don't know how to be a lady, she confessed. Gaspar held her gaze. I don't need a lady, he said. I need you to live. Aurelia felt her chest tighten. What about you? She asked without thinking. Are you going to live? Gaspar stood still. The question took him by surprise. Instead of dodging it, however, he answered with a simple truth. I'm learning, he said. Aurelia looked down, a tear trembling in her eye. Gaspar turned towards the door, as if staying any longer would cause him to say things he shouldn't. Before leaving, he paused. Rest, he repeated. And when you wake up, remember this. You don't have to run away today. Aurelia nodded, and for the first time in a long while, the idea of not running away didn't scare her. Gaspar left, the door closing softly behind him. Aurelia lay down slowly. Her body was still weak, but her heart was less lonely. She fell asleep holding on to the certainty that someone had finally decided not to let her go. Aurelia woke up with her chest feeling less tight and her throat feeling less rough. She was still weak, but she no longer felt as though her body were betraying her with every breath. Outside, muffled footsteps echoed through the house as if everyone were walking on glass. Doña Elvira entered with a tray and a face that did not promise calm. "Eat," she said without greeting. Aurelia sat up slowly. "Did something happen?" she asked. "Everything happens," replied Doña Elvira, setting down the tray. "But today, something useful is happening." Aurelia took the cup with trembling hands. "The notary?" she asked in a barely audible voice. Doña Elvira stared at her. "He's coming," she said, "and he's coming through the back door, like people who know how to keep their mouths shut." Aurelia swallowed. "I don't know what to say," she confessed. "You know what to say," replied Doña Elvira. "And what you don't know, you keep quiet." Aurelia lowered her gaze, and the Marquise asked. Doña Elvira exhaled through her nose. "She never rests," she said. She sent another message. "She says her gathering will be tomorrow, and she is expecting His Highness. She would like to thank the young lady personally." Aurelia turned pale. "Thank you," she repeated. "It's a way of sizing you up," replied Doña Elvira. Aurelia clutched her cup. "I don't want to go out," she said. "I don't want them to see me." Doña Elvira leaned forward slightly, as if her beard were a shield. "You're not going out today," she said. "But you can't hide away forever either." Aurelia looked up. "What if they see me and destroy me?" she asked, trembling. Doña Elvira did not sugarcoat it. "If they want to destroy you, they'll try, even if they can't see you," she said. "The difference is that if they see you standing, it's harder for them." Aurelia swallowed. Standing. The idea sounded like a challenge to her. The door opened and Gaspar entered. He was in no hurry, yet his presence filled the room as if he had made an irrevocable decision. "Good morning," he said. His voice sounded softer than usual. Aurelia was surprised to hear such softness in his voice. "Good morning," she replied softly. Doña Elvira bowed and stood up, as if understanding that today was not a day to leave important matters unattended. Gaspar looked at Aurelia. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "I feel awake," she replied, attempting a slight smile. Gaspar nodded. "I need you to feel strong," he said. "The notary is coming today." Aurelia swallowed. "Here?" she asked. "Yes," confirmed Gaspar. "In this room. No one will take you out. No one will walk you around." Aurelia exhaled the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you," she said. Gaspar looked at her for a moment, then looked away, seemingly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "It's no favor," he murmured. "It's only fair." Doña Elvira moved towards the door. "I'll keep watch," she said, "because today the hallways have ears." Gaspar nodded and Doña Elvira left. Aurelia stayed with Caspar. The silence became more intimate than uncomfortable. "I thought about what you said," she blurted out unexpectedly. "About deciding," she continued. Gaspar looked at her intently and asked. Aurelia clenched her fingers into the sheet. "I never decided anything," she said. "They always told me where to pay and when to be quiet, and now I'm afraid to choose." Gaspar took a step closer, but didn't invade her personal space. "Choosing is scary," he admitted, "but it's also liberating." Aurelia looked him in the eye, and it hurt to feel something breaking inside her. "Will you let me choose?" asked Gaspar. He didn't hesitate. "Yes," he replied, "even if it's not in my best interest." Aurelia looked down, a tear welling up in her eye. She whispered, "No one ever told me that." Gaspar stood still, his voice growing lower. "I'm telling you," he replied. There was a knock at the door. Doña Elvira opened it slightly and announced, "Notary Salcedo is here." Gaspar nodded. "Let him in," said the notary. He entered with careful steps. He was a middle-aged man dressed soberly, with eyes that darted around quickly as if measuring the risks in the air. He carried a folder and a pen. "Your Highness," he greeted her, bowing. Then, with professional respect, he looked at Aurelia. "Miss." Aurelia felt strange hearing that word. "Miss, no, girl, no, that one." "Good morning," she said, clutching the sheet. Salcedo opened the folder. "He asked me for discretion," he said, looking at Gaspar. "I asked for truth," Gaspar corrected. The notary nodded. "I provide both," he replied. He carefully took out a document. "I have reviewed the record that was pointed out to me. I know half the story, as with all hidden stories, but the paper speaks clearly." Aurelia felt her heart pounding. Gaspar did not move. "Read what is necessary," he said. The notary looked at Aurelia before reading, as if asking for permission. Aurelia swallowed hard. "Read," said Salcedo. The notary read specific excerpts without embellishment. It was a birth record with discreet notes. Aurelia's name, the mention of Don Esteban de Almenara as the father, the care entrusted to Catalina, and the indication of safekeeping. He said nothing about love or tragedy, only what could be recorded. Aurelia listened as if she were being given a new body through words alone. When he had finished, she remained silent, breathing slowly. "This is a secret," she said at last, her voice trembling. "What does this make me?" The notary closed the folder. "It makes you recognizable," he replied. "It doesn't make you a different person. It gives you backing against anyone who wants to deny your existence." Gaspar looked at Aurelia. "Do you want this to be used?" he asked directly. "Not to show off, to protect you." Aurelia bit her lip. "I don't want to humiliate anyone," she repeated as if that were her only certainty. Gaspar nodded. "It's not humiliating," he said. "It's preventing them from humiliating you." The notary cleared his throat carefully. "Your Highness," he said, "there is one more step if you want complete formality, a declaration before witnesses, with me and an ecclesiastical representative present. It's not a spectacle, it's protection." Fray Tomas appeared at the door as if he had been summoned. "I am here," he said calmly. Aurelia looked at him with silent gratitude. Gaspar nodded. "Do it," he told the notary. But today, the notary looked at Aurelia. "Do you agree to declare your identity as it appears on record?" he asked. Aurelia felt her hands trembling. She looked at the ceiling for a moment as if searching for Catalina somewhere. Then she looked at Gaspar. He wasn't pressuring her. He was simply present. "Yes," she said in a firmer voice than she expected. "I accept." The notary prepared his pen. "Name?" he asked. "Aurelia Benavente," she replied. She paused, swallowing her hurt. "Aurelia de Almenara." Saying it made her feel both afraid and strangely calm. Fray Tomas approached with a serene expression. "Breathe," he said softly, like a prayer. Aurelia signed with a trembling hand. The ink stained the paper slightly. She was embarrassed. "It doesn't matter," said the notary, as if reading her thoughts. "What matters is that it's there." Gaspar signed as a witness. So did Fray Tomas. The notary stamped it. "This is now protected," said Salcedo. "If anyone wants to twist the story, they'll have to face the paper." Gaspar bowed slightly. "Thank you," he said briefly. The notary looked around as if listening to the walls. "I beg you," he said, lowering his voice, "to be careful who you listen to. Some ears work out of habit, while others work on commission." Gaspar held his gaze. "I know," he replied. Salcedo. He put everything away with restrained haste. "I'm leaving," he said. "It's not good for me to stay too long." Fray Tomas accompanied him to the exit. Once they were alone, Aurelia exhaled and placed a hand on her chest. "It's over," she murmured. "I'm no longer a whisper." Gaspar looked at her. "No," he said, "it's not over." Aurelia lowered her gaze and finally a tear fell. "Catalina," she whispered. Gaspar said nothing. He just stood there, holding her without touching her. The door opened quickly. Doña Elvira entered, looking tense. "Your Highness," she said, "the Marquise is on her way." Aurelia felt her body shrink. "No," she said barely audibly. Gaspar raised a hand. "Calm down," he said. Doña Elvira pressed her lips together. "She's coming with two ladies," she added, "and Ramiro is following her like a shadow, as if he doesn't know which side he's on." Gaspar straightened up. "Good," he replied. "Let them into the living room, and don't let anyone else come up." Aurelia swallowed hard. Are you going to? Gaspar looked at her. I'm going to close this place, he said. Aurelia felt fear, and something else, something she didn't dare name. I don't want you to lose your honor because of me, she blurted out, as if that would stop him. Gaspar held her gaze. My honor isn't lost by protecting someone, he said. It's lost by letting it fall. Doña Elvira crossed her arms like a guard. I'll watch the staircase, she said. Gaspar nodded. He went downstairs. Aurelia stayed upstairs, listening. Although she couldn't make out any clear words, she could hear the confident rhythm of a visitor who thought he owned the house. There was soft laughter, an elegant greeting, and the sound of glasses being set down. Aurelia clutched the sheet. She wanted to get up, to go downstairs, to run away. Then she remembered the pen, the signature, the word, I accept. She forced herself to breathe. Downstairs, the Marquise sat as if the armchair belonged to her. At her side were two women with fixed smiles. Ramiro stood nearby, looking nervous, as if he wanted to be useful and avoid blame. Your Highness, said the Marquise when she saw Gaspar enter. How nice. I didn't want to bother you, she continued, but I thought that, after our conversation, it would be prudent. Prudent is not to come without being called, Gaspar interrupted her, without raising his voice. The Marquise smiled as if he were charming. You are always so direct, she said. I come with a proposal that will relieve you. Gaspar did not sit down. Speak, she said. The Marquise clasped her hands together. A quiet convent, she said. With care, with discretion, the young lady would be safe there. You would keep the peace, and Seville would stop gossiping. Gaspar stared at her. Seville doesn't pay my conscience, he replied. The Marquise bowed her head. Your Highness, she said softly, conscience cannot be eaten, but reputation can be sustained. Gaspar took a slow step forward. I will ask you a question, he said. Are you concerned about the young woman or about the spectacle? The Marquise chuckled at both, admitting shamelessly that she was concerned about both. That is how society works, and you know it. Gaspar nodded. I know, he said. That's why I'm bringing you facts today. The Marquise raised her eyebrows. Facts, she repeated with interest. Gaspar looked at Ramiro. Do you want to hear them, Ramiro? He asked. It was a question that sounded like a judgment. Ramiro swallowed. Yes, Your Highness, I am at your service, he replied too quickly. Gaspar turned back to the Marquise. This house is not hiding a stranger, he said. It is caring for an identified person. The Marquise blinked. Identified, she repeated, and her smile tightened. Gaspar discreetly took out a sealed envelope without waving it around. A notary has confirmed the record, he said, and a chaplain has witnessed it. The two ladies looked at each other in surprise. The Marquise maintained her composure, but her eyes sharpened. How interesting, she murmured. And who is this person, then? Gaspar paused for a moment, as if gauging the power of the name in the air. Her name is Aurelia, he said, and she doesn't need your permission to exist. The Marquise smiled, but it was no longer sweet. I didn't ask for your permission to let her exist, she said. I asked for prudence on your part. Gaspar looked at her. My prudence today is to set limits, and he replied. You will not suggest a convent again as if it were the only dignified way out. The Marquise bowed her head. So you intend to present her, she said, her voice calm but dangerous. Because if there is a record, there will be history. And if there is history, there will be talk. Gaspar did not blink. If you open your mouth with lies, he said, I will close it with documents. The Marquise let out a cold laugh. How dramatic, she commented. But don't forget, Your Highness, that documents can also be interpreted. Gaspar moved a little closer. Interpretation is also open to challenge, Ramiro replied. He intervened tremulously. Your Highness, he said, perhaps it would be better to wait and think rather than provoke. Gaspar looked at him as if he were finally seeing him properly. Provoke, he repeated. Provoking is not hiding a woman as if she were a source of shame. Ramiro lowered his gaze. I'm just saying that what you say changes depending on who's listening to you. Gaspar cut him off, and that was the end of that. The two ladies remained silent and uncomfortable. The Marquise tilted her head towards Gaspar as if whispering in his ear. You are falling in love, she said. It didn't sound like a question. It sounded like an elegant accusation. Gaspar did not deny it. I am taking responsibility, replied the Marquise. She smiled. How beautifully you disguise it, she murmured. But the court is not fooled by pretty words. Gaspar held her gaze. I am not seeking to deceive, he said. I am seeking the truth. The Marquise rose calmly. Then make it public, she said. Because if you don't, the city will do it for you. Gaspar did not move. I will, he said. The Marquise blinked in genuine surprise for the first time. Ah, yes. Gaspar spoke without raising his voice. Tomorrow there will be a private mass in this house, he continued, with witnesses and the notary present. Those who have doubts should come respectfully. Those who come with malice should not come. The Marquise pressed her lips together. Are you challenging the world? Said Gaspar. She nodded slightly. I am challenging your habit of crushing, replied the Marquise. She took her fan and opened it slowly. Very well, she said. I will come and see how firm your truth is. Gaspar bowed slightly. See for yourself, he said. The Marquise. She smiled, but it was full of bitterness. And if it turns out that this young woman has an uncomfortable past, she murmured, remember that I offered you a clean way out. Gaspar replied without hesitation. Clean is not hiding, he said. Clean is holding on. The Marquise bowed and left with her ladies. Ramiro lingered for a moment, as if he wanted to say something. Gaspar looked at him, and Ramiro lowered his head in defeat. Upstairs. Aurelia heard footsteps on the stairs. She tensed. The door opened and Gaspar entered, looking serious, yet calm. Aurelia struggled to her feet. What happened? She asked, trembling. Gaspar approached her, and for the first time since she had known him, he offered her his hand without thinking too much about it. Not to pull her up, but to support her if she needed it. Aurelia looked at his hand as if it were a dangerous bridge. She took it. She crossed over. Gaspar said that she would no longer be a rumor tomorrow. Aurelia swallowed hard. Will they look at me? She asked. They will look at you, he confirmed. I'll be there. Aurelia squeezed his hand without meaning to. I'm scared, she confessed. Gaspar nodded. Me too, he admitted, but it's not the same fear as before. Aurelia looked at him, confused. Gaspar fell silent for a moment, as if deciding whether to tell her the whole truth. Before I was afraid to feel, he finally said. Feeling cost me dearly. Aurelia felt her chest tighten. I don't want to cost you anything, she whispered. Gaspar shook his head. It cost me more not to feel, he replied. Aurelia was speechless. His hand was firm and warm. Doña Elvira entered as if she didn't know how to knock without interrupting. Your Highness, she said, everything will be ready tomorrow. Gaspar nodded. She looked at Aurelia, and her voice softened just enough to make it hurt less. Rest today, she said. Tomorrow you will comb your hair properly. Aurelia swallowed and nodded. Yes, she murmured. The next day arrived without asking permission. Aurelia wore a simple, clean dress chosen by Doña Elvira without any excessive embellishments. She combed her hair with steady hands. Don't slouch, ordered Doña Elvira. If you slouch, they win. Aurelia took a deep breath. I'm trembling all over, she confessed. Let them tremble, replied Doña Elvira, but don't bend. Fray Tomas came in to accompany her to the small chapel in the house. It was not a procession, it was an intimate affair, but there were enough witnesses present to ensure that no one could fabricate anything. Notary Salcedo was present, looking serious, as were two members of staff whom Gaspar considered loyal, as well as the impeccable Marquise, who was sitting with her smile under control. Gaspar waited, standing up. When he saw Aurelia enter, he didn't look at her as if she were a rumor. He looked at her as if he had been waiting for her his whole life. Aurelia felt her heart beating so hard that she was afraid she would collapse. Gaspar took a step forward and offered her his arm. Ready? He asked. Aurelia swallowed. No, she replied honestly. But I'm here. Gaspar nodded. That's more than enough, and he replied. Fra Tomas spoke in a calm voice without making long speeches. We are here to declare the truth, he said, and to remember that dignity is not negotiable. The Marquise listened without moving, but her eyes scanned every gesture. The notary read the brief statement. When it was her turn, Aurelia responded, her voice trembling but clear. Yes, she said, I am Aurelia, and I will not accept being erased. There was a strange silence, not one of easy compassion but of surprise, as if someone had spoken where normally only heads would bow. Gaspar stepped forward. I also have something to declare. The Marquise raised her eyebrows in interest. Fray Tomas looked at him intently. Gaspar turned to Aurelia. His eyes did not soften completely, but they opened where they had previously been closed. Aurelia, he said, and the name sounded different in his mouth. When I saw you on the street, I thought I was just avoiding death, but that wasn't it. Aurelia felt her legs tremble. It was my life that was on hold, Gaspar continued. I was living like a stone, and you forced me to look. The Marquise clenched her fan. Gaspar didn't care. I can't offer you a life without gossip, he said. I can't promise you that the world will be fair, he continued, but I can promise you this. No one will ever knock you down again as long as I live. Aurelia felt her eyes fill with tears. Gaspar lowered his voice, but everyone could still hear him. I choose you, he said, not because of your surname, not because of your history. I choose you because of your strength and dignity. I choose you because you're still here even though everything hurts. If you want, I want you to be my wife. The Marquise stood still, finally without a smile. Doña Elvira inhaled sharply as if she hadn't expected it, yet had wanted it all along. Aurelia stood frozen. Her heart screamed one thing, but her fear screamed another. I do, she whispered breathlessly. Gaspar didn't rush her or pull her in. He simply held her gaze as though offering something without demanding anything in return. Aurelia swallowed. She looked at the Marquise, who was watching her as if waiting for her to falter. Then she looked at the notary, who waited solemnly. Then she looked at Fray Tomas, who gave her a slight gesture to calm her down. Then she looked at Doña Elvira, who held her gaze as if to say, don't hide. Then she looked at Gaspar. I don't want to be saved as if I were an object, she said in a trembling voice. I want to walk alongside someone. Gaspar nodded. That is what I offer you, and he said. Aurelia took a deep breath. The fear did not go away, but it subsided. Yes, she said at last. Yes, I do. The air changed. There was no noisy celebration. It was simply a certainty. Fray Tomas spoke calmly. Then so be it, he said. There was no rush. There was simple solemnity and measured words. The promise was spoken without embellishment. Gaspar took Aurelia's hands carefully, as if he did not want to hurt her. Aurelia felt the tremor in her own fingers, but she was not ashamed. I promise you respect, said Gaspar. I promise you truth, replied Orbonin. The Marquise rose before it was over. She kept her composure, but her voice was colder when she spoke. Your Highness, she said, you have made an interesting decision. Gaspar did not look at her in fear. I have made a just decision, he corrected. The Marquise smiled slightly. We'll see how long justice lasts in court, Gaspar murmured. At last, he looked at her without aggression or trembling. It lasts as long as one upholds it, replied the Marquise. She clenched her fan. Then uphold it, she said, and left without another word. Once the witnesses had left and the chapel was almost empty, Aurelia stood there unsure what to do with the body. Gaspar looked at her as if he could finally breathe. Do you regret it? He asked quietly, as if the possibility frightened him. Aurelia let out a small laugh, tears in her eyes. It scares me, she confessed, but I don't regret it. Gaspar approached slowly. He didn't kiss her hastily or dramatically. Instead, he just rested his forehead against hers for a moment, as if allowing himself a closeness he hadn't permitted himself before. My heart was broken too, he murmured, and I didn't know. Aurelia closed her eyes. I thought they were going to let me die, she whispered. And look at me. Gaspar exhaled, sounding almost like he was laughing or crying. I look at you, he said, and I don't intend to stop. Doña Elvira appeared at the door, pretending not to be moved. If you've finished breathing, she said, there's food, and there's a house that now has to learn to call you by your name without trembling. Aurelia let out a clearer laugh. Doña Elvira, she said, I didn't cut her off. Doña Elvira raised a finger. Don't thank me, it annoys me, she said, her voice no longer sounding as harsh. Later in the living room, the servants looked askance. No one dared say anything. Gaspar entered with Aurelia on his arm, neither hiding her nor showing her off. He simply walked. Ramiro stood there stiffly, unsure what to do. Gaspar looked at him. From today on, he said, this house is run with respect. If you can't, you leave. Ramiro swallowed hard. Your Highness, he said, I just wanted to protect you. Gaspar replied without shouting. You protect me, he said, by telling the truth, not by bowing down to those who smell blood. Ramiro lowered his head. Yes, Your Highness, he murmured. Aurelia felt a strange calm, not because everything had been resolved, but because she was no longer cowering. Fray Tomas approached with a slight smile. How do you feel, daughter? He asked. Aurelia, she breathed as if she were finally not asking for permission. She said. Fray Tomas nodded. That's freedom, replied Gaspar. He looked at Aurelia, his voice low and just for her. Seville can talk, he said. The court can try, but you're not alone anymore. Aurelia squeezed his arm. And neither are you. Gaspar looked at her, and for the first time a real smile appeared on his face, albeit briefly. Then he whispered, Let's live. Aurelia nodded, tears of joy streaming down her face, and felt the air finally enter her lungs. Because in Gaspar's hand, there was no longer rescue. There was choice. And in her chest, there was no longer shame. There was home. Thank you very much for listening to this story from beginning to end. We hope it moved you as much as telling it moved us. We would love to hear your opinion. Leave us a comment telling us where you are listening from and what you liked most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel and give it a like to show your support. This motivates us to keep creating and sharing more emotional and educational stories. Before we say goodbye, we'd like to remind you that a recommendation for another exciting and charming story will appear on the final screen. If you would like to watch it, simply click on the video. Thank you again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.